A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Bophelong, a place of hope. I am your host, Ule Molebati. It is Disability Awareness Month for South Africa that is home to over 2.9 million people with disabilities. In light of that, this week we bring you the story of one man who has had to overcome physical challenges. Zainal Miran, however, says that it is the social barriers between the disabled and the able-bodied that are greatest challenges of all. Here is his story.
Born in Pietermaritzburg in the 1970s, Zainal Miran's life began with many challenges.
I was born prematurely, and as a result of complications during birth, I developed cerebral palsy, brain damage due to lack of oxygen. And what that resulted with is it impacted my lower limbs, so I was unable to walk until the age of 4.
For Zainal's family, his cerebral palsy meant that he would have to undergo various surgical operations as his body continued to grow.
My muscles weren't growing as fast as my bones were. Okay, so I used to sort of buckle up type of thing. And as a result of that, I couldn't walk. So what they needed to do was, as I grew, they used to have a series of operations so that you could elongate the muscles so that I could then learn to walk all over again. So it was over many years. I had a total of about 17 different procedures done. The last was when I was in high school, where I sort of stopped growing. And yeah, after each occurrence, it was like starting from scratch again. You had to learn to walk from the beginning. Yeah. So those were in terms of the operations that I've had.
Zainal's family, however, never gave up on him and tried their very best to ensure that he lived longer than what doctors had anticipated and defied the odds by learning to walk from scratch every time he had to undergo another surgery.
If you look at the time, you're talking about the mid-70s. Things were very different back then in terms of medical advancement and technology. So you didn't have the things that you have today. So you didn't have ultrasound, you didn't have scans. So there was no pre-warning of what was going to happen. So it was a very different time and place, and my parents were basically told when I was born to think that they don't have a son, because the first sort of medical opinion we had said, I wouldn't survive. From my mum and my grandmother, but I think naturally they were more the protective ones, the maternal instinct sort of came out very strongly, so they always tried to sort of shelter me and sort of protect me from harm's way, whereas my dad was the complete opposite. He would challenge me at every opportunity. He would tell me to push the limits, never say that you cannot do something or until you've proven otherwise. So it was a nice contrast, in terms of growing up in the environment, because you wouldn't give an opportunity to sort of feel sorry for yourself. That never came into the equation, is that, okay, this is, you are who you are, this is what you've been dealt, you deal with it.
Like every child, Zainal had dreams and ambitions of his own that were not at all influenced by his disability.
To me, the sky was the limit. I was always very ambitious, very, very driven, wanted to do things, go places and that type of thing. Obviously, it's an individual thing, not necessarily in terms of someone with a disability, has those aspirations and that type of thing. I think what is key for me early on is to sort of come into a point where I realized what my limitations were. And once I came to terms with those, it allowed me to then excel from there, because I knew what I could and couldn't do, and I became comfortable with that.
Life as a child and later a teenager, however, brought challenges that were not just physical, but were social.
Especially in the early years, in terms of, as a toddler growing up, and then as a young child, in terms of, you weren't able to do what other kids were doing, so I couldn't go to a playground and play, or I couldn't sort of interact in that type of thing. That was very frustrating. Later on, it was overcoming many of the the barriers that you face as a person with disability, and not really in terms of what you're able or not able to do, but in terms of like I said, the barriers that are placed in front of you. I think we've come a long way over the years in terms of the strides in that, where the physical barriers are there, but I think more importantly, I think the challenges for many is actually the social barriers. At the time I spent at the school I was referring to, the special school in Kenya, I needed to be there because it was best for me. It had everything that I needed to be in terms of specialists and therapies and that type of thing. But at the same time, it was a very sheltered environment. You were very protected. You were basically picked up at your door, with the school, taken to school, you're surrounded by high walls, and they're often taken back home, And those that were lived far away actually stayed at the hostel as well. So it was good in the sense that that's what we needed, but it was also very sheltered. So when I came to a certain age and I didn't need any further operations, I had an option to sort of go to sort of what's called a mainstream high school type of thing, which I then did. I think it was around standard 8 or so. And that was a huge adjustment in terms of sexuality and that type of thing. It's one of those, again, those misconceptions and those preconceptions that a person, because of the virtue that you have a disability, won't be interested in someone or won't have the same aspirations to sort of, have a family, settle down, get married type of thing. And again, I think it comes down to the stereotyping that we have and the stigma that's attached to it. I'm very fortunate. I have a family of my own. So it's not a given that, because a person has a physical disability that they won't be interested or they won't want to foster relationships on an equal playing field, And again, it comes down to that whole greater social interaction and things that, people are socialized and they tend to sort of believe certain things which are not necessarily true.
Yet even though the misconception that persons with disabilities are asexual still persists in many societies, Zainal thinks back with warmth to how he met the woman that he now calls his wife.
When I met my wife, it's actually, we met for the first time, I think just over 10 years ago. What was nice about it is that we actually communicated for a while before we actually met. So that was good because we got to know each other quite well in that space. And I think it put us in good stead because we got to know the person first, and we got to realize, in terms of, we have a common value system, common beliefs and that type of thing. The basics, the foundation of the relationship was there, so it's something that could be built on. And I think it's an aspect I'm very fortunate as well, in that the relationships that I have today are very long-lasting. If I have to take one positive from growing up with a disability, is that the close relationships you have, for sure that they're genuine.
Then came what he considers his greatest achievement, his daughter, who was born healthy and able-bodied.
If I look at my daughter, she's grown up in an environment where she doesn't discriminate because she hasn't been taught that. And I think we need to focus on that because it's a future generation that's going to make the change. If you look at the youth, kids, and if we teach them that, we're part and parcel of the same society, we've all got things to offer, we all have value to add, I think that will have a greater change than all these initiatives. Although they have their place in there, so they are good in terms of raising awareness, we need to affect the change, and I see it with my daughter, she's been my inspiration. If I see her grow and develop and thrive, then I said, okay, look, it can only get better.
Absolutely inspirational. Share your thoughts about Zainal Miran's story. Tweet us at Bophelong Show, or of course you can email us, bophelong@sabc.co.za. We always look forward to hearing from you. I will be back with more right after the break.
GovTech is South Africa's premier ICT event hosted by CETA. Our theme for GovTech 2014 is a government empowered by technology. Our topics will explore e-government, infrastructure and broadband, reducing the cost of ICT and service delivery, best practice, innovation and success stories. Join us at the Durban ICC on 2nd to 5th November 2014. Register now on www.govtech.co.za.
The judge slammed corruption in both the private and public sector. Referring to irregular and wasteful government expenditure, he said it could no longer go on.
The high-profile corruption scandal has dominated Spain's headlines in recent weeks, the scandal touching a nerve as Spain emerges from its downturn after a slew of corruption cases involving politicians and the king's sister.
Tourism is a vital part of the economy. It contributes about 5% to the country's GDP and is a significant contributor to various industries such as food production, retail and transport.
For all your business news, stay tuned to your favorite channel, SABC News, at 1 Monday to Friday.
Zoom into Africa. This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abu Samen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
Technology is all around us and is improving lives across Africa, like how young Nigerians are connecting to the internet. There are doctors finding new ways to save lives in Cameroon, and the South African public transport system that is now getting Wi-Fi. We have gadgets, apps and loads more, some of which play a big role in Africa's growth. A huge part of this African growth is technological innovation. To find out a bit more about social media and technology news from here in Africa and abroad, join me, Phumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Bophelong, a place of hope, with me, Bule Molebatsi. Freedom of movement is a right that all South Africans are able to enjoy. For people with disabilities, however, it isn't always that simple, especially in the case of looking for employment that not only builds your career, but also has facilities that make it easier for you to move around as you get the job done. These and many more are issues that are close to Zernal's heart. Take a look.
Zainal Miran, a 37-year-old man who lives with cerebral palsy, says there is still a lot of work to be done with regards to breaking down the social barriers between the able-bodied and those with disabilities. He is part of the solution in assisting in having that vital conversation.
Earlier in the year, I had the privilege to be invited for the National Council for Persons with Disabilities South Africa to have the biennial conference earlier in the year, and I was invited to participate in that. And that's a basic organization. It's a national organization. It's an umbrella body that they represent more than 300 organizations nationally around disability and the different types of disabilities. That kind of interaction, it puts you in good stead because you can see what's happening currently, but what's also happening in a global space in that type of thing.
We set off to the main offices of the National Council for People with Physical Disabilities of South Africa to hear exactly what organizations like them really do.
The National Council for Persons with Physical Disabilities in South Africa, and some people also call it the Council, but it can be confusing, stands for, as in the title, that we assist persons with physical disabilities. But during the past couple of years, we've realized that it's not only physical disabilities. We are more looking at a diverse approach in all what we are doing. So we are including physical disabilities, vision, hearing, intellectual. So we no longer refer to them and they and us. It's all about togetherness and a diverse approach.
With November being celebrated as Disability Awareness Month, both Donnie and Zainal agree that this will assist in conscientizing South Africans.
The National Council feel that this is a golden opportunity to bring the message to a high point. We forever do awareness, that's one of our mandates, but we get this opportunity this month to do a bit more. And I think it's getting more and more visible all over the media, the corporates, that's aware that it's Disability Month. Because a couple of years ago, you could have asked and they would not They would say, no, we didn't even know it's Disability Month. So at least that is also pointing in the right direction.
South Africa's constitution is one that is respected and held in high regard all across the world, as it has allowed for all people to receive equal opportunities regardless of whether they're disabled or not.
The major piece of legislation that's applicable is the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which was passed in 2000 and came into force in 2001. And that legislation in Section 9 actually prohibits discrimination in terms of disability. And it says that discrimination is either removing or denying from a person the means that they require to effectively participate in society, or alternatively failing to promote and to take measures to actively allow people to engage and actively promote their own rights within society. So those are the two aspects of that. There's also the National Building Regulations. The National Building Regulations Part S deals with facilities for persons with disabilities. That's also one of the other pieces of legislation that's applicable. Then there's the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that has various articles. So it talks about the right to education, it talks about the right to political activity, the right to all the rights of it deals with the rights of children. Those are the three main tools that we deal with, or that are applicable.
Everybody in South Africa has equal rights and opportunities. There is no discrimination based on whether you, on religion, on sexuality, on disability. So that is the main point, is that everybody in South Africa has the same rights. So if we go to accessibility, we cannot say, sorry, the building was built before a certain day and age and it's a historical monument. On the point that you don't have equal access as a person with a disability means that there's been discriminated against you as a human being. And you've got grounds then to go to the courts and to say, listen here, I'm being discriminated against.
People make the assumption that, and again, it's not a generalization, but I mean, for them, that if someone has a physical disability, it's assumed that you have a mental disability as well. And that has been very difficult to sort of, get that message and convey that's not necessarily the case. And that's kind of dynamic that you're dealing with, because, you're trying to, you're confident in your ability and what you can and cannot do. But before you go into the situation, any new social situation where people have the normal issues to deal with, you've got this extra thing that you've got to, hurdles you've got to cross to say, look, this is who I am, this is what I can do, and then, get on with it. So that has been, for me, the biggest, in terms of stereotype, if you want to call it that, or assumptions that people make. And I experience it, even today still. It's something that I think I've gotten used to, or perhaps immune to a certain level.
Zainal expresses how difficult it is for others that are disabled, and even for himself, to find employment where the physical aspects of the working environment are such that the buildings are accessible to the disabled.
If you as a person with a disability are successful in being placed in an open labour market situation, the onus rests on the employer to reasonably accommodate you in that position. Meaning, if it's small things like lifting a table to the correct height for you to be able to fit under the table, making sure there's an accessible toilet facility on the floor where you are working if you are a person in a wheelchair. Person with visual impairments needs different programs for the computers to be able to read on their screens. So you can go on and on and on regarding that. And then besides that, is the sensitization of the current employers that's working there as well.
After the break, we hear what Disability Awareness Month represents to those with disabilities and what it means for the able-bodied. Stay with us.
Zoom into Africa. This is Burkina Faso. The president is Mr. Blaise Compaoré. Burkina Faso got independent from France on 5th August 1960. The population is more than 17 million people. One of Burkina Faso's major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is CFA.
In Parliament, Higher Education and Training Minister Blaine Nzimande has conceded that the bursary scheme is not enough to meet the growing demand from students.
Funding for universities is not enough. We'll be open about that. We will continue to ask for more from government as a department.
We've always said that the NSFAS budget must be 16 billion rand and that no qualifying student must be prevented from studying just because they cannot afford to do so.
There's been concern about citrus exports to Europe and investment contracts.
There are more opportunities for us to sell sugar, wine, ethanol, some fruit products than we had before, and that could create jobs.
That's business news, weekdays at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abusamen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
You're still watching Bophelong with me, Pule Mulebati. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that attach to persons with disabilities, and how do we move past these? What should we be thinking about and doing during this Disability Awareness Month? Let's hear what Africans with disabilities have to say.
We joined in on a training of trainers of disability equality training for Southern Africa, and here we heard perspectives of others on what exactly are the biggest misconceptions with regard to people living with disabilities.
I think the biggest misconception by far is the assumption that disabled people are socioeconomic liabilities, not socioeconomic assets. I think initiatives like this, like the DET training, seeks to communicate that disabled people are socioeconomic assets and they can be active participants in our socioeconomic environment.
The confusion is people do not know where disability lies. For instance, they believe disability lies within the tradition. That means for you to have disability, it's a curse, right? That is that thinking about disability, of which misconcept that a disabled person is part of society. She or she should take part in the society, right? That is where the misconception is. That means traditionally, we say because it's a curse, we have to take it away from us. Therefore, it makes people with disabilities not be included into society.
If I compare the understanding of disability in the past 5 years, it's a little bit different from the current situation because of what the disability movement is doing in terms of try to raise awareness, making people understand. But the general conception of disability, it still needs a lot of work because most of the people are still look at it as an illness within the person. Or they look at it like a person with disability, someone who needs medical attention all the time. And also they regard it as a problem having disability. So that person is in trouble, which he will never get out of it.
I would say there's lots of misconception because of the people not having the understanding about people with disability. Because if you remember in the past, we were all regarded as people that were supposed to be at home, who doesn't belong to the society. But now, with the organizations that we've got that are promoting awareness so that our society could understand the disability better, I think it's somehow improving the understanding and the knowledge that we also belong in the society, to understand that we are diverse and we are different, but we all deserve equal rights.
And with South Africa recognizing this month as Disability Awareness Month, what is expected of the public at this time?
All South Africans in all walks should come into terms with the fact that disabled people are active members of society and they should be afforded such opportunities.
The way we can pave a way is to make an inclusive society, right? Let's take non-disabled people, put them in the feet or on the shoes of the disabled. What will they experience? Then from there, they will tell you something different. Or let's take a disabled person, right? Put on the non-disabled person's shoes. You'll find she will view things differently. Therefore, one thing that is very, very important for us is to make sure that we create an inclusive environment for all.
I think society must think about changing attitudes, because the attitude is a big problem. And so the attitudes make people with disabilities to feel negative about themselves. So if we can change the attitudes, then society will be better, it will be more accessible for everyone.
I'm happy that we have these initiatives to sort of raise the awareness and that type of thing. But I think for me, we can do all the nice things and do all these things and people get aware of that type of thing. Is what happens after that. It's about continuing it, throughout the year, every single day. Breaking down those barriers that we built up in terms of the social barriers, and just starting those dialogues I was talking about, interacting with people more. So the moment we get rid of the ignorance, and the way we do that is that people normally become ignorant. It stems from fear. It's that uncertainty of that not knowing, because it doesn't fall into what we consider to be normal in inverted commas. So if you focus on those things on an ongoing basis and use these months or the days and that type of thing to sort of highlight that and bring it to the fore, and then I think that's very positive.
Well, you had it right here on Bophelong, but that's how we wrap up this edition of Bophelong. Tweet us at Bophelong Show or email us bophelong@sabc.co.za. Until next week, have yourself a fabulous weekend. From me and the rest of the Bophelong team, it's a goodbye.